Hey, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me. We've got Luke Bentham from the Dirty Nil here. We talk about his jobs at Starbucks as a limo valet, as well as their most meaningful tours, the hardest tours as well, how they love being unapologetically extra, and their new record, Fuck Up, where that name came from and how they're completely set on it. Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, you can review it, you can rate it, you can tell your friends. It's on all the platforms. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Everyone who listens to these episodes are the people that make it. So thank you so much for listening and keeping up with it. I've got a bunch of episodes that I'm looking forward to. As always, cheers for coming along for the ride. East London's Signature Brew have been brewing music-inspired beers since 2011. You can buy beers off their website, signaturebrew.co.uk. Ones they've collaborated on with Mastodon, Idols, Slaves, recently Sports Team, and with the voucher code 101 podcast, that's all capitals, you can get 10% off your order delivered directly to your door over lockdown. Cheers for listening. Here's Luke Bentham.
Well, I mean, when we really started getting into touring, which was probably around the age of 23 or so that's 2013, you know, our touring was definitely very few and far between. So we were just beginning to go play in the United States and do kind of short tour, like kind of regional tours. And in between those jobs, I was working at a butcher shop during that time, which is, you know, in retrospect, not the greatest job for a guitar player to have. All the knives and, you know, sharp things and a lot of just being around things designed to cut through flesh and being, you know, sometimes a little hungover or maybe not hungover, but thinking about music, thinking about what I'd rather be doing and not thinking about the cleaver in my hands. So, you know, luckily I escaped unmaimed for the most part. At least physically. Emotionally, I'll be forever scarred by working at a butcher shop.
How long were you working there for then?
About 2 years on and off. And also during the same time, I was working at Starbucks, and I was the worst fucking Starbucks employee ever. Like they would tell you how many pumps of whatever bullshit go into anything. And I just said, yeah, fuck that. And I found the whole thing, I was just a bad employee. I did not want to do that job very well because I really resented the clientele coming in there and the way that they treated the staff. So I was like, well, you know, you're going to get your perfect drink made my way every time, not necessarily your way. So I didn't really like that job, but ironically, I won an employee of the month for some reason. I don't know. The boss just liked me. I was trying to invent a lot of drinks and stuff while I was there, mostly kind of to entertain myself. But I invented one kind of like frozen drink that has like red syrup kind of smattered all over it, and I called it Mother Teresa's Revenge. But they didn't adopt any of my inventions. Very sad, but headquarters didn't really like my contributions. But I didn't really last long at Starbucks. I left on my own accord miraculously. But I liked the butcher shop more because it was kind of learning some practical skills, and the quality of food was superb. So it was nice to be around that.
And were you quite open with your, you know, colleagues about playing music? Was that something that you were up for talking about?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I made it very clear that I would very much so rather be out there than here to my bosses. But what my strategy, inadvertently, but it always worked out this way, was that I would be the jester of of wherever I was working. And I would kind of win the appreciation or / amusement of all the other kind of grunts of any job that I worked, and would kind of, have you seen the movie Cool Hand Luke? There's a warden and there's and he's in charge of a bunch of prisoners, and there's kind of like his nemesis is one of the prisoners, and the prisoner kind of entertains the rest of the jailed guys by kind of sparring with him on and off in a playful way. But anyways, that's what I would do at all of these jobs. It wasn't really my intention, but I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to work up to their standards because I didn't care about making lattes. So I decided to win the faculty of these establishments, and just basically that would be my currency at these places. So I remember being at the butcher shop one time, And in front of all the other employees, my boss tried to dress me down and say, okay, Luke, this is the worst that I have ever seen this job done ever in my entire time being a butcher. And I said, that's not the worst thing anyone's ever said about me. And everybody, all my other coworkers laughed and kind of gave like a little applause. And I said, thank you. And then later, a couple weeks later, he yelled at me. He's like, Luke, what do you actually even do here? What are you doing? What are you doing all day? And I said, I'll leave his name out, but I said, sir, I'm here for morale. All right. I keep the spirit high. I might not necessarily do a whole lot of work in air quotes, but I keep everybody happy and motivated. I'm always the guy to go on the coffee run because I don't like being here. So I keep everybody caffeinated and smiling and ready to do their jobs. But
you're the vibe technician.
Exactly. I'm a vibe tech. So that was traditionally my role at these jobs when we were just beginning to tour, and my ambitions were really beginning to swell for how much time I wanted to be dedicated towards music and my goals. And just while I was facing the reality of, we're not going to be on the road the whole time because we don't have an agent yet. We're booking our own tours. We don't have a record deal. We don't have a manager. We didn't have anything. So we were just booking everything ourselves. So our opportunities were of a certain limited scope for a few years. But by the time we made it across the pond to England, that was at the beginning of 2016. That was February of 2016. By then we had our first record coming out. We had a whole team around us. And basically at that point, the band had become more or less a full-time job for me.
Is that because you're away so much and being on tour was sustainable?
Yeah, and I'm the kind. It was sustainable in a sense. It's never taken a whole lot of money to make me for me to make it work, just because I'm used to not having any money to be able to be happy with music. So I would just find a really cheap set of living arrangements, and I would do odd jobs and stuff. But I just, by the nature of my own creative process and my hate for work, I just wanted to work all the time on trying to write new songs, and that used up. I realized that when I was working at a lot of these shitty jobs that I was just spending the entire time just walking around thinking about lyrics and working on songs and making phone calls on behalf of the band, and my brain was just completely on that. So I was just a terrible employee because, as I said, my mind was always elsewhere. I just wanted to be back on the road.
Is that kind of hyper focus? Does that feel like sometimes like a blessing and a curse?
Certainly sometimes. It definitely pisses people off in my that are close to me when I'm I have a glazed over look in their eyes. They're trying to tell me some story, and I'm just thinking about the bridge in a song that we're working on. But they have I think that the people that are extremely close to me have a deep reservoir of patience for me and my habits and my approach to music.
Right, because it is funny because you've got so much to offer. It makes you quite like a deep person in that sense.
For sure, yeah. And I am definitely I just, when it came to all of my earlier relationships in my 20s, just kind of burnt out because I wasn't in a willing position at least, to be dedicating my time and emotions towards, and my mental capacities towards somebody else's problems. It took me a while to find someone who was super independent and also hyper focused on what they're doing to match my kind of temperament. So it was, people call me selfish, and I say, fuck you. That's what I would say. I would say you just you're not lucky enough to have found something that is worth driving yourself crazy and obsessing about. And so don't blame me for that. That's my response to that. I just turned 30, and I've definitely gotten more of a handle of communicating what I kind of like, that, about my kind of habits and what I'm going to need personal time for me to just be able to work on my stuff so that I can, really actually, when I'm spending time with somebody else, to really actually listen and not be half in, half out thinking about the things that I'm working on. So I have gotten better at partitioning those two worlds, but I'm certainly not perfect at it. And there's times where I have a really challenging time separating them. But that's just people who are highly motivated and who are really, really obsessed with what they do. It's tough to love them.
And you can kind of forgive people for thinking, oh, you want to be in a band, huh? And so you start the band, you start Dirty Nil, or the band that you were in before that. And were you in a band before Dirty Nil?
No, we started when we were 16.
So you're in Dirty Nil, you do those first few tours, it goes pretty well. And then within a few years, you start building up this team around you. Does it then, once you get to that stage where you're like, oh, people actually kind of like this and people actually kind of want to work with us? That's kind of a different beast, isn't it?
It was. And it was like, it definitely was it was definitely a watershed building of relationships when that stuff came together very quickly once we got a manager who was extremely motivated. And our manager saw us play. We were desperately in need of a manager at the time because we had a lot of opportunities coming in. And there was a little bit of derision internally about what types of opportunities we should be exploring, maybe some divisive opinions, I should say, rather. There were some different opinions about what we should do and what, as I said, which opportunities we should explore. And so we really needed some kind of experience to help handle our affairs and shepherd us through the intimidating waters of, the music industry.
That can't be brushed over, right? The fact that you've got three people. Even as a trio, it's going to be quite hard, right? Meeting in the middle with each other and kind of satisfying everyone.
Yeah, it's tough. You can't make everybody happy. Like everybody's going to always have like a different opinion on things, but you have to, if I ever recommend things to young bands, I would just say that like, make sure you establish, it's a Wayne Kramer from the MC5 piece of advice that he gave about 5 years ago. He said, whenever you form a band, make it very clear what everybody's jobs are going to be and just agree upon them from the outset. And that sounds a little idyllic and it might be harder to achieve than it sounds, but it saves a lot of bullshit of people. When you have a bunch of artists and egos and, people, I find the most amount of conflict when I talk to other bands, and most of the conflict doesn't revolve around the actual product, like the music that they're making. It revolves around the presentation of it. So I think it's just like you need to have some kind of flow and division of labor and responsibility that addresses that, rather than it being a free-for-all open debate over every single decision. Because you can just waste so much energy internally before you even turn your swords outwards. Like it's a fucking waste of time and energy, and it burns people out. Like you gotta get a bit of a structure going, and then just stick with it. That's really what I would advise people to do.
Especially the start, if you're like the songwriter and the singer, and you're the one who books the shows, which you can totally imagine happening. I think that happens with a lot of bands. After a while, that's going to be pretty grating on someone.
Yeah, and we had a pretty good division of labor at the beginning. Like we had the different jobs changed hands. Like, the very beginning, I would book our shows, and then Kyle kind of took that over. And then when Dave joined, Dave booked our first American tour. It's still an amazing accomplishment, like a 6-week tour throughout the United States.
Wow, 6 weeks.
6 weeks, all on shows that he booked, which is amazing.
Fuck.
But we were desperately in need of some kind of we just needed a manager. Like I never really, for me, I was always DIY by necessity and not by principle, because I appreciate that ethos, but I just saw so many people floundering under it, and I was really interested in working with somebody who was ambitious and who was fucking smarter than us about what we were actually facing, and who had some experience, rather than our high-minded morals at age 22 and the things that we thought about the music industry. Like, it's just, you're gonna, like, I really wanted to, I was totally happy to cut somebody in who knew what the fuck they were talking about.
And how did you kind of gauge that? Because I mean, in music especially, people can speak a lot of hot air.
No, it's a lot of bullshit, man. I mean, like, well, that's what really got us. Like, you know, we had about 3 different managers who basically presented us with who kind of courted us early on, and we had one when we were like 18 or like 19 years old that if we signed that contract, we would have broken up because of how horrific the terms were. And luckily enough, I come from a very fortunate background. Both my parents are lawyers. So they looked at that contract and tore it up in front of my face and said, fuck this guy. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So, having a strong legal team within my home has been a very huge asset to our career at large. But then we had another set of guys that were kind of that were promising kind of a cooler route that appealed to our more fragile egos, who were like, you know, we can get you signed to Matador, and you know, we can be on this cool label and do these cool festivals. And we're like, that sounds cool, man. And then when it came time for them to actually get our visas to go to the United States and they couldn't put anything together. And so I got super fucking pissed off. We gave them 6 months to do anything and they couldn't do anything. So I phoned them up and I said, you're fucking fired. Don't call me ever again. You can't do shit. And, you know, I felt bad about the way I handled it, but we met up last year and we had a beer and we laughed about it, and they're on to different opportunities and stuff.
That's quite a strange place for you to come from, because you're clearly very self-motivated. You kind of, you know what you want to do. And so to be let down like that must have been a bit of a shock.
Yeah, well, it just kind of added a little bit to, I was very jaded about the music industry at large when I was like 20 because of how many early opportunities, early things, early landmines we almost stepped on, be it contracts or a lot of just contractual things, different labels that wanted to just like absolutely sign us to these chain gang contracts that were just fucking horrible. So I was very deeply skeptical about working with anybody outside of our band, which sounds super dumb in retrospect. But I was just, that was my reaction to a bunch of people trying to screw us over when we were kids.
I think it sounds smart.
Yeah. So it took a while to kind of have to open up and ourselves up and be even a place that like where we were willing to contemplate working with someone in an official sense. So when we met our manager, we met through a third party who knew that we were looking for a manager actively. And our manager saw us play at this big festival in Hamilton, our hometown. And
not too far away from Toronto, right?
Yeah, exactly. About 40 minutes away from Toronto. People call it the Brooklyn of Toronto. But people in Hamilton reject that term. I don't give a shit because I find civic pride to be the most boring shit ever. So anyways, so when we met our manager, it was a pretty instant click of like, this is going to work. He was an absolute wild man with a solid track record of working with, you worked with Sum 41 and
I've just got to ask, I mean, I was hugely into Sum 41 when I was younger, and I actually just listened back to All Killer No Filler, and it is exactly that. And so growing up around that, did that have a huge impact on your life, that record?
Certainly. I mean, it was when Sum 41 was at the top of the MTV heap, or the Canadian equivalent, which is Much Music. It was awesome. Like, it was like, there's a little bit of a, it was great. It was definitely very influential as a kid to see so much guitar music on in such public and in such mainstream media everywhere. It was definitely a different, it definitely motivated us to want to play music. But anyways, it was an instantaneous connection between us and our manager, because our manager has a partner who is like strictly a logistics person, and our manager is more of like a wild man, genius thought guy whose energy matched ours perfectly, and our kind of celebration of spectacle and the absurd and humor and trolling the world with a grin. So we just, it was a very instantaneous connection that we knew, win or fail, this is what we want to do. We want to work with this person.
In my experience, meeting people who, work as managers or press or whatever, even if it's not that obvious immediately, there is this kind of narrative, this kind of rhetoric that you're trying to be similar to the thing that's been a blueprint of success. So from that point of view, the thing that I fucking love about music, being a music fan and also orbiting these kinds of people, is when people are like, no, this is me. I'm fucking going to do this. I want to sound like Kim Crimson, or I want to have this huge spectacle. And that is, that's an absolute brilliant thing about Dirty Nil.
We appreciate that.
You see you live and you can tell that you just want to do that rather than have anything else in mind. Well, it's just so easy to see when other people are trying to do it. And I don't blame people because you're like, of course, you want it to be your job. You want to kind of have some kind of stability, or have some kind of idea that this thing that you're about to do is going to go well, rather than, because it feels like a crapshoot a lot of the time, right?
For sure. And I think that we really kind of matched the energy with our manager about that they're like, this is about, obviously there are some goals, like some fiscal goals to lay out for yourself so that this is sustainable. But at the end of the day, the game is rigged. So you might as well just do it your way and see what the fuck happens and take no prisoners and gamble. And that's what we do. We do a lot of gambling and we try shit and it fails, but most of the stuff we try and people copy it. And that's the best form of flattery. Like, I love seeing when people employ the things that maybe we didn't pioneer, but like, we try things that at least we thought we generated the idea. Nothing's new under the sun, as they say. But, we see people in our peer group emulating things that we've done. And that's how we know we're on the right path.
And I think seeing you live, I think I always get like a Beastie Boys vibe. I don't know. It's something about your bassist.
There's definitely a Beastie Boys vibe. I think there's a lot of Ross brings the thunder.
Ross.
He's an absolute he's a true original.
You can feel that. You can feel that.
You'll never meet another guy like Ross. There's never a player like him or anything. Like he can play anything.
That must be nice for you to be around that.
Oh, it's fantastically liberating in terms of, I can bring in any kind of song. We're never going to make like a country song or a country rap song. Maybe, who knows? Depends how much we want to troll people. But, Ross can play over anything, and he's got a really long background in hardcore. So he's excellent at very, very strong backup vocals, and we share the same kind of the three of us, when we've got an idea that is really kind of playful and we know it's in a weird territory that no one has really done before, we get excited about like how it's going to piss some people off and confuse people. And that kind of mad, wide-eyed energy is a major force for action in our band. Like when I presented Fuck Art to the group, everybody like did this hilarious mad horse laugh, and we kind of looked at each other and kept chanting it, and we knew that was our record title. And there was nothing that our record label or our published, no one could talk us out of it.
So you got the manager at this point, and you have this kind of infrastructure. So when you're touring, it feels, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe it felt a little bit more legitimized. And so did the three of you were you all on the same level as, I am going to prioritize this over everything else? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that, I had a job in 2015, like right before we went on the Warped Tour. Like we were already touring the United States heavily. We hadn't yet been to Europe as a band. But I had a job before we did this fucking 10-week Warped Tour, and I was cleaning limos. That was my job.
Wow.
So limos would come in and I would service them. I would top up the oil. I would gas them up. I would clean them. I would shine them up. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of weird shit in a used limo in the back seat of a used limo. So that was a very interesting job that way. Looked like a lot of good nights happened in those limos. Anyways, one of these days I was a little bit hungover and I was driving around a stretch Escalade limo and I sheared the rear wheel well off it. And they told me, hey, you're going to have to pay for that, like, out of your pocket. And I said, well, no, like, you can fire me, but that's totally legal. And you're totally within your rights, but you can't charge me for something I broke at work. And they're like, well, it's the right thing to do. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's bullshit and it's illegal. It's actually illegal. So I looked it up and I was right. It's illegal. Like, if you work at the fucking Hubble telescope and you break that thing and they're like, well, Sven, you owe us $100 million. How are you going to pay? How does that, like, does that make any sense? No, but they can fire you. Like, that's not how employment law works. So anyways, I got in a dispute with these people and they tried to convince me that it's the right thing to do. And I said, I work here. I'm not your friend. Okay. It's not that, like, you can, how about let me take the decision away from you? I quit. Y'all owe me $400 as a gesture of conciliation. You can have that money and never talk to me again, please. And that was it. So I just left and I let them keep my paycheck.
So they tried to make you pay for this expensive wheel arch, which would presumably be thousands upon thousands.
Yeah, it was just basically the superficial plastic wheel well. They wanted like them. $1,000 out of me, and I'm like, I'm not paying you $1,000. They're like, don't worry, we'll just slowly take it off your paycheck, like $200 at a time. I'm like, I fucking quit this job. Yeah. So I was working like 10 hours a day by myself at this place. I did not like it. And so basically the reason why I tell this story is because after that I was like, I'm fucking done doing things that aren't working in a positive direction for my band. And regardless of what that means, really, like, I don't want to. I would rather just work for, like, just live really modestly, not spend any money, and in the time that we are home. And just, I need to be able to make music for us to work on and keep working, so that the whole, if in the times where I've had a side job that I'm working while we're home, the whole engine just stops because I'm just slow. I need to work on things obsessively and all the time to get them done.
And if you've got if you've got a slot on the Warped Tour, I mean, that's a vote of confidence, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was just like, we're going on the Warped Tour, going away for 10 weeks. We'll see what the hell happens after that. So we did that. That was insane. And then we did another full U.S. tour that fall after we got home from there. So 2015 was a huge year of touring. 2016 was even bigger. We went to Europe 3 times. We went to the U.S. 3 times.
And how crazy did you get on that? How emotionally crazy did you go?
Definitely on the Warped Tour was one of the most I've ever felt like. That was the first time I turned 25 on that tour, but it was the first time that I felt like it was definitely the most profound test of my faith in, like, do you really want to do this?
Do you remember that moment?
There was definitely acute moments, but also just a long-term flavor of that in my mouth, taste of it for several weeks, because I mean, you know, we were one of the only bands, we were the only rock band on the tour. Like, there was maybe 1 or 2 other ones, but it was like when we got the offer to do Warped Tour, we were like, fuck yeah. You know, No Effects and Bad Religion and all that shit. I had not opened up a Warped Tour lineup catalog in a long time. I just assumed, because of what, you know, I've always heard. And then when they announced all the artists, I'm like, I don't know who any of these motherfuckers are. Like, and they don't sound good. Like, it was a lot of bands with fake guitar cabs and, like, computers and there was no rock and roll music, and, like, there wasn't even any punk music on the Warped Tour. Like, there wasn't anything that you would, you know, at least, not in like in a cool sense, like it's not punk enough. I'm just saying there wasn't anything that sonically would sound to me like punk music. And so, no one was coming to see us play on that tour other than like a few people once in a while. And it was really like, if you wanted to come see us on the Warped Tour, it was really tough. Like you'd have to get there early. You'd have to find the Ernie Ball stage, which I like to call the stage that God forgot, because they would put it in the weirdest, most out of the way corner of whatever fucking field we were playing. And then you would play a 20-minute set at a random time during the day, and then sit at your merch table baking in the sun for the rest of the day and hope that you sell a couple t-shirts. And then,
do you think about dropping off?
Never, no, never any thoughts like that. Just like, I mean, we never quit anything, but it was like it was just in a long, my brain was more in an existential place of like, can I do that? How long can I do this? There was no kind of acute thoughts of like, well, I don't want to do this tour anymore. It was more like, is this the path for me kind of deal, which, it was, what ended up happening on that tour though, is that slowly, the faculty of the tour would come and see us every single day. And by that, I mean, all these big bands, they're like guitar techs and the bands themselves and all the cooks on the tour would come see us every day. And our stage was just full, all the side wings with just the biggest bands on the tour would just be standing there watching us play every day, bobbing their heads and singing along. And so the gains that we made from that tour were not apparent while we were doing it, but having My Chemical Romance's guitar tech be a huge fan of your band yields dividends in strange and mysterious ways. And there's a lot of other examples like that we accrued on that tour.
For real. I think that's maybe something, a lovely little thing for us all to think about, that within our own journeys, that, the small things that we do along the way, paying dividends is the perfect phrase for it. It comes back later on, doesn't it?
You never know. And that's why, not to be corny or anything, but it's crucial to never mail it in ever. In one of my, I don't know how much of a Ricky Gervais fan you are, but
he says some dumb shit that kind of offends me, but I mean, I love The Office.
Yeah. There's one line that he has though about working, like he's talking about like singers being like not showing up for gigs, and just like imagine like a laborer saying like, you know what, I'm not really like feeling that good today, and then his boss being like, mate, just put the fucking bricks down, mate, like, or whatever. Anyways, that's how
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, just do your job. So I mean, I know that's a huge contradiction to what I said about my attitude towards Starbucks, but I always viewed those things as a means to an end. I was never mentally there while I was there. I was just working on the job that I actually want to do. So yeah, that's the thing, is that like, there were some bands that actually dropped off the Warped Tour because they just thought it wasn't doing anything for them, and they were sour on stage. And you can always see when people are bumming up there on stage. And at a big show or a little show, there's an incommunicable, or there's an unspoken but very like a clear vibe that everyone in the room feels when someone doesn't want to be there when they're on stage. And I never want to admit that. So yeah, as you said, like if whatever you are pursuing, like you never know what little steps you're taking are going to do for you in the future. So always try hard. I
mean, did that help shape you, at least knowing that you know what you didn't want to be like? Did that help push you further into your vision of, this grinning, rock and roll troupe having a blast?
It definitely galvanized my my will to do this come hell or high water. That I really decided on that tour that yes, this is exactly what I want to do, and there's nothing else for me. I'd rather, like, even if we play for 5 people for the rest of our lives, this is what I want to do as long as I can. And I definitely developed, I mean, like a lot of the things that I do on stage now, and my general kind of stage, the things like the I don't know, the things that I guess I can say that I'm known for doing, if I can say that, I developed on that tour because I was desperate for people to come to just stop walking past our tent to the vape store and watch our band play for 5 seconds because we traveled, 4,000 kilometers to be here. So,
and do you take that into, I mean, doing support tours? I mean, that totally seems like a route of towards doing what you want to do. You want to do a lot of support tours to, get in front of the people who might like your band. And so does that kind of play into that as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the object, it's the support tours are a very, very valuable route of getting new fans. And there have been some that have been incredibly valuable for us, like opening for Against Me, like on a full US tour, did a lot for us. Yeah.
What was that like?
That was one of my favorite tours we've ever done. It was, there's been a few bands that I would put in like the kind of upper echelons of bands that we've ever played with that kind of hold like, there's a special level of like, holy shit, this band is really good. And they're really good every night. They're like a proper band. Billy Talent is one of them that's just like, you never see them not giving it 1,000%. And you never see them not sounding incredible every single night. And Against Me is the same thing. Against Me was like the closest I think that you'll get to see like a band like, like a band like The Replacements or something that's just like a really loud, proper rock band that can get everybody jumping. And it's not in like kind of a cheesy...
it's so fucking real, isn't it?
Oh, it's I was a fan. I was a fan beforehand. I was really big into New Wave when it came out. I was like 16. But seeing them play live and hanging out with them and that was a very special tour.
And it must be funny hanging out with that crew because they've been doing it for so long. And, in Laura Jane Grace's book, I mean, you can kind of hear it through the records over the years anyway, but just to read their ups and downs, to see them, it's not necessarily coming out the other side. It's the continuation of that journey. And did you sort of see that when you were hanging out with them?
I did. Yeah. It kind of yielded itself or revealed itself in different ways of like sometimes you could see like how much of a hardened and distilled version of a rock show that they can give and how kind of effortless it is because how good they are and how many hours they have cumulatively and together. That was very impressive. But then like behind the scenes, seeing just kind of picking up on the bonds that tie this band together and how long they are. And that was a special thing to witness and very inspiring, but also kind of some of the ways where they still seem like a young band when they're kind of like, when we saw them like working on, like Tom Petty passed away on that tour, and so they did a Tom Petty cover. They did "Running Down a Dream," and I remember seeing them working on that song, and they see like I could see my own band in them working on this song. It was like at the same time, as I said, they were this polished, distilled powerhouse of a rock band. And at the same time, kind of that band that we all are in the garage, like, no, it's an A chord, dumbass. Like, it's funny to see them hold that. It was beautiful to see both sides of the coin and very, as I said, inspiring that like, we're on a, not comparing ourselves in terms of our career trajectory, but that these guys are lifers, and that's exactly what I want to be too.
With that in mind, looking back at your discography, 2016, the first one, Higher Power, then 2018, and then now, like looking back at those two albums and, the third one, we're on the eve of it. What's changed between those records?
I would say there's a level of confidence that we have now that we just didn't have. I think there was a lot of nervous energy on Higher Power that, Higher Power was also like a fucking headache to make in a lot of ways. It was very disjointed, and we learned it took the longest to make out of all of them just because of the way we made it. and we learned a lot of hard lessons about recording and about preparation for recording on that one.
How was the way you made it?
Well, we did all the basic tracking in Toronto for about 2 weeks, and then we spent like fucking a month or something doing vocals and guitar in Hamilton. And, you know, there was like, it was poorly planned out in retrospect. We just thought, you know, this is going to work out great and all this stuff. But like, we just weren't as ready to make a good, like a powerful sounding record. And I still, you know, I went back and listened to a couple snippets of Higher Power the other day just because I was curious as to how it sounded. But, you know, we learned that pre-production and demoing is really important when we did that record, because there were certain things that we, you know, when we got in to do it, where we learned like, hey, I thought you were doing this and it turns out you're doing that. And now we're kind of, you know, not exactly playing together all that well on this little part here. And there's just a cumulative effect of those kind of oversights and like lack of preparation that certainly affect the overall sound. And again, it's got a sound, it's wicked, it's raw, it's wild. I love it. But the focus for Master Volume was to not do the same thing. We wanted to have things really, really ironed out, and we practiced every day for a year, really, to make that record. About 8 months or so, and we were on tour.
That's no small feat to do that.
No, and that's what we did with this one too. You know, we just I'm ultra suspicious of anything that takes less effort, and I'm not interested in shortcuts when it comes to making music. And as I said, I feel very fortunate that I have something in my life that I get to decide the thing that's going to kill me and drive me crazy. And it's rock and roll, like thinking about it and working on it and tweaking things and, you know, lying awake at night, like thinking like, you know, I think I can just tighten up that second verse lyrics. And like, you know, it's just, I drive myself nuts working on it. But as I said, I feel very fortunate that I get to choose the thing that's going to drive me nuts rather than working at Starbucks and having just the existential emptiness drive me crazy.
Doing that's not going to leave much time for much else, really.
No, exactly. So, I mean, when we did Fuck Art, we
oh God, are you still stoked? Do you get to say that?
Yeah, I'm super pumped. It's a title designed to confuse and amuse, and it's also, you can't say it without smiling. Even my grandma couldn't say it without smiling. Like it's meant to bring joy, and it is. So, when we made Fuck Art, I think like, you know, we had kind of really explored a kind of classic rock. Some classic rock influences like Aerosmith and Queen when we were doing Master Volume, and when we got around to Fuck Art, we were kind of more on a thrash tip. We were more into Ride the Lightning, and we were listening to a lot more bands like Turnstile and this band called Candy.
Cool. I haven't heard them. I'll check that out.
Very, very aggressive, awesome, brutal recordings. There's a song called Lust for Destruction that's like, I can't stop listening to it even a year later after hearing it. It's just an incredible recording. But just heavy, ignorant fucking riffs. And but also I think we had kind of stretched our tastes out a little bit on Master Volume and explored them a little bit further when we did this one, and we were less afraid to do some more vulnerable things, and also do some heavier things. So to me, it sounds like the kind of the heaviest thing that we've done in areas, and the lightest thing we've done in other areas, and most kind of vulnerable. So it's got it has a different kind of vibe from the bravado of Master Volume. It's got more sledgehammers and crying, all the above.
Excellent. Well, Luke, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. When I saw you at the Black Heart in Camden last year, or maybe this year, I came up the stairs to the back of the room, and it was raging. It was great.
That was a great show.
I think that spirit really embodies it, and it's great to hear, you talk about it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I very much so appreciate you having me on.
Fuck yeah. Oh, cool. What are you up to the rest of this week to end with?
I got a few more interviews, and just working on the hits of tomorrow with my boys,
Couple more times saying fuck art.
Yeah, a couple more times saying fuck art. I will leave you with one thing though, that I told my mom that we were going to call the album Fuck Art because she had signed us up for painting lessons at the beginning of the year. And me and my mom and my sister were doing painting lessons, and it was so much fun actually. I actually started painting because of it, but there was this older guy in the back of the room, and this is like community college, or community class lessons. So it's very kind of low pressure, really relaxed. But there's this one super whiny dude in his 70s who's just like, my painting doesn't look like that, and I got a bristle stuck in my painting, and what do I do now? And the teacher was very, very patient with him, and at some point she just tells him to, just finish your painting, and then I'll help you after. And then I heard him say "fuck art," and that's why we call our album that. And I told my mom that's what we're going to call the album, and she left 2 different messages on my answering machine saying, "Luke, please don't call your album Fuck Art." And so that's what we credited her. Rebecca, please don't call your album Fuck Art Bentham in the thank yous for our record. So.
Well, and she left you 2 voicemails. There was another one saying, again, please don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like a week later. She's just like, I've been thinking about it more, and like so worried. Yeah.
Great. Well, Luke, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been an excellent conversation. Great to talk to you.
So that was Luke Bentham, edited by Sophie Porter. Check out her band, Other Half. Their new record, Big 20, is absolutely one of the best things that's been released this year. And if you liked this episode, like I was begging you at the start, please go ahead and share it. Cheers for listening.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a fiddler's elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.